that is what we're missing, I think, in our government right now. A lack of telling the truth, or being willing to be, self-critical, or really accept, the stuff that you are not happy about in yourself.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to America Who Hurt You. I'm Sarah Jones, and this podcast is for all of us who are trying to live the best lives we can, even as America seems hell-bent on doing its worst. Before we get to my guests, if you hear this episode or you're watching it on our new YouTube channel, which I highly recommend, if what you see and hear is helping you get through these times, please support our show by sharing this episode, following us across social media, and you can subscribe to our Substack. Yes, I am Sarah Jones. But in this episode, we're kind of looking at America and all the beauty and challenges of family with some folks you might not expect. Ben Stiller, yes, that Ben Stiller, the actor and comedian you know from Zoolander and Meet the Parents and a zillion other memorable roles. Plus, he's the director and driving force behind the award-winning Apple TV drama Severance. And my other guest, Christine Taylor, the actress you know from roles in Reality Bites and the Brady Bunch movie and the critically acclaimed show Search Party, plus her podcast, Hey Dude, the 90s Called. Incidentally, she's married to Ben. So we all sat down to talk about this moment in America and especially family through the lens of their most recent shared project, this powerful documentary, Stiller Meara, Nothing is Lost, which centers on Ben's parents, the legendary comedy duo Jerry Stiller and Ann Meara. Before we get to Ben and Christine, if you're new to this pod, you may not have heard the voices of my characters speaking up yet. But since Ben's parents were huge stars starting back in the 1960s, my character, Lorraine, let her tell it.
I can't believe you have Jerry Stiller and Ann Meara's son on your show. Now, the documentary was so beautiful. It has family footage that Ben's father, Jerry, he had all these home movies stored in their family apartment, which you get to see in the movie. And it's just like, well, you have to watch it for yourself.
Thank you, Lorraine. Yes, everybody should watch the movie. But first, I hope you're going to love this conversation with Ben Stiller and Christine Taylor as much as Lorraine and I did.
It's wonderful to be with both of you. But as you can tell, when Sarah sits and watches Jerry Stiller and Ann Meara, I'm there going, I remember that episode. I remember,
You lived it, yeah.
I say this to you to say...
Are we related? I feel like we're related.
We are related.
We are. Sure. I watched, I cried, I had to metabolize it over a weekend and then again. I think there's so much generosity in you two telling this story together as you do. Like you've been together 25 years. That's a long, am I right? I think 25.
Yeah, married 25, together almost 26, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, or probably coming up, yeah.
Right.
26 years, yes, for sure.
Yes. So here's the thing, and I don't want to spoil the film for everybody, but the layers, you're getting, this beautiful love story and love of creativity story. They're both so fucking talented. Watching how they work out their material, how these two people who are of different ethnic backgrounds are appealing to America at that time. It was like, to be America's sweethearts was a rare thing, to be all of themselves, to be, not a white, a waspy duo or something. They were exactly who they were. And the New York it was so delicious to watch just them. Then the layers of them bringing you and your sister on TV shows back then. And I'm like, I see where Ben Stiller comes from. So if you haven't seen this film, first of all, I would like Ben and Christine to get a word in edgewise. What sparked this? The timing of it? What made you create this beautiful piece?
Thank you. I'm glad thanks for those nice things you said and how it connected with you to hear that. It was honestly just my dad dying. And I kind of, I had this moment of knowing that this apartment wasn't going to be in our lives anymore. And almost like a panic or something, I got to try to somehow capture it or keep it or somehow remember it. And also, it was May 2020 when my dad passed, and it was, height of COVID. And so we couldn't do a memorial service or anything for him. So I was just thinking of ways to, I could do some sort of a tribute or something. But I also knew I didn't want to just make a reel or a thing that was just sort of like about their careers. I wanted it to be something that hopefully, as a documentary would somehow have another connection, another layer to it that was more than just about, kind of talking about what they'd done as a comedy team and as actors. And I knew their relationship, their marriage was there was no big drama though. And that was one of the things I worried about. Was like, oh, there's no big drama. There's no moment where like we found out that my father isn't my father or something like that. I was kind of hoping maybe we'd get some twist like that. But
filmmaker in you.
But exactly.
Yeah, you're like, what's the hero's journey that might be horrible for me to experience, but we'll make a great movie. Yeah,
it turns out. But there were all these tapes and these audio tapes that my dad had made and saved, and he just saved all of this stuff in the apartment. And within that, there were these discoveries about their relationship and.
And can I just ask, wasn't it like hundreds of hours? I mean, he really documented their lives.
Yeah, I think there's something really magical and incredible about, audio recordings from a long time ago. They just take you back to another time. And more even than film, where like the audio, you just, because you're listening to these little details of the environment and the place and, whether it's like somebody talking in the background and it's just my parents, sometimes they were improvising to write sketches to do either commercials or to do on television or in their nightclub act. But then you'd keep the tape recorder going and just hear these discussions, they had about their relationship and us and all these things.
I want to say, for people who, America Who Hurt You and I and my characters, I think of myself as a one-woman multiracial democracy, struggling with this, what is America if not one giant dysfunctional multiracial, family that really needs, more honesty. And this film was
and empathy too, I think.
And empathy.
It really sort of evolved as the process went on in terms of course, I didn't want to make a movie about me, but it ended up, of course, that had to be part of it. I think to make it more honest, because the thing is, I was really starting to like delve into their relationship, and the recordings that my dad made had sometimes arguments and things that they were having with each other that I was going to put in the movie. And I felt if I'm going to be really honest, also as a the storyteller, I can't just pretend that I'm some objective, like David Attenborough or somebody else you're making, observing. It's like, this is my life. So, and I'm fucked up, and I made so many mistakes and all these things that I, was able to judge my parents as a kid, because that's what you do when you're a kid, right? You look at your parents as these, kind of people who have all these issues that that are not you, and you're not going to be them. And
you'll never be them, right?
It'll never happen.
Which I think is healthy and good, and that's how you should look at yourself. That you say, okay, I'm going to do my own thing, but yet the contradiction, the dichotomy is also that there's this desire to also do that thing that's in the genes and the family, our history, really, like that's just part of who we are, these performers or actors or storytellers, whatever it is, this creative thing that then is like the same as your parents, but yet you're trying to differentiate and separate from your parents. And I think not only, not until you get older can you really have more perspective, especially when you have kids. And that's when, Christine and our relationship and how it evolved even over the years that we were making the documentary became a part of the story, because I was realizing that my parents' influence on our marriage was something that I, had to acknowledge.
I'm going to keep drawing this parallel to America as a country right now. It's sort of the opposite of everything you're describing, right? If we have tapes, we're hiding them. If we have, kind of the historical record of who we've been as a country, good, bad, ugly, whatever, we're just sort of hiding from it instead of being willing to look at it and talk about it. And I love how you two as a couple in the film you reveal how, right around this time, like we see you from the outside and we see you on red carpets or whatever. And, kind of like America, if all you're doing is showing everybody you might not be seeing what's really there. And you two really show in this powerful way how you were going through stuff as a couple.
I sort of feel like for us, and again, as Ben said, because when you started to make the movie, it was sort of, I remember so well in real time, because you were still shooting season 1 of Severance, and you took some of the
that little thing.
Yeah,
you're shooting that little. How's that going for you? Your little web series? How's that?
Right, that little thing. But I remember you saying, "I'm going to have Jessica, the DP, come over to the apartment, and we're just going to start shooting stuff." And
were you two? Because what I remember is you were going through a separation around the time of the pandemic.
Yes, and so this was the period of time where we were all living.
Yeah, we had been before. It was before the pandemic,
but
really.
Pre-pandemic. But then when COVID hit, we all sort of, bubbled up together.
Yeah.
Like a pod. You did the pod thing.
Exactly, the family pod.
Which was, something we decided to do because we weren't together, but yet,
right.
We felt like, I think there was still a connection. We ended up getting back together. And that when the pandemic happened, it put us in the same house, but we weren't a couple.
You're right. Right.
And
we were co-parenting. We were trying to navigate this weird time with our kids who, one was graduating high school at the time and our son was graduating 8th grade. So they were both about to go into these new chapters. And so we really the co-parenting was still something that was omnipresent for us. But I do feel like the thing about during that period of time when, essentially life shut down.
Right.
And you talk about it's very easy, as a couple, as a country, as anything to sort of like shove it aside, bury things.
Yeah.
When there's nothing else going on, then it's really time. Then all you have is time to look at these things, to, we did therapy regularly throughout that period of time on Zoom. And we would go into this room and we would talk and we would look at each other and we'd talk about things. And it was, I remember because the therapist too, her technique was we face each other.
Oh my God.
You don't sit and just face the screen. She would face we would have our chairs facing each other.
Oh my God.
And so, but there was nowhere.
I feel so stupid that all my life, every couples therapy. Have you ever done that before?
This is something we've never experienced before. And it's very intimate.
My mind is blown.
And she would, even if we would look to her for help, she would say, "Don't look at me. Look at Ben. Look at Ben. Say that to Ben."
Wow.
And so we dug deep. I really have to give us that, credit, because I think, it could have been very easy to just be surface and watch movies together and play games. But because we were sort of at this impasse, and I think at that point we were, sort of talking about if we were to get back together, what would this look like? How would it be different for us? What would we need? What would we want? And being able to safely express all of those things. And so,
can you two please form a government for this? I am so serious that this parallel just won't leave me, that if people are willing to sit and look at right, like you literally looked at each other and were able to, because I know that's not easy. I know it's not, that's the uncomfortable thing. It's why we don't do it. But if you're willing to do it, I'm not saying everybody who attempts what you do finds their way back to each other, but it damn sure seems better than the alternative, numbing out or,
Well, it's like, I think it's about, what you were saying earlier about honesty or accepting, reality, or being willing to look at the, truth and trying to be honest with yourself. That is the basis of, I think, just a functional relationship with people and the world. And that is what we're missing, I think, in our government right now. A lack of telling the truth and being honest with oneself, or being willing to be, self-critical, or look, really accept, the stuff that you are not happy about in yourself?
Lack of telling the truth. Ooh, that part. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, Ben and Christine share more of the honesty and even the hilarity around the healing work that's getting them through these times. We're back with more Ben Stiller and Christine Taylor talking about their documentary, Stiller and Meara, Nothing is Lost. Coming up, Christine talks about how the film captures her bond with her mother-in-law, the great Ann Meara.
And that's kind of, for me, I think where I realized coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, as I was making the movie in that period of time, that this willingness to work through our problems and to talk with each other was definitely something that I think I had modeled for me, by my parents, and had not really even thought about it. And that's why it kind of clicked for me in terms of the movie. It's like, oh, this is actually really, for me, influencing how I'm looking at our relationship, as opposed to going like, okay, that we're done, move on, divorce and, start again, or not deal with all the shit that was, not working. Or deal with it, but not in that way. But like, we really delved into it. And I think a lot of people, you can do that with somebody, and maybe it's not a good thing to be together. There was a lot there that we still, I think, wanted to hold on to in our family that we thought was valuable and hadn't explored really, even through having done a lot of therapy. And I think for me, that became an important part of the storytelling in the movie, because when I interviewed Christine, was really at the very end of the shooting process of the movie, over the 4.5 years of making the movie. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning of shooting the movie, we wouldn't have been able to do that because we weren't at that place.
Yeah, and nor did you know that that's the direction it would have even headed at that point.
Not at all, yeah.
When you started shooting it, it was our daughter was, still in high school, and that's a young version of her that's interviewed. That's who you see in the film. And then my son and I were 4 years later, and Ben sort of said to us, and I remember it so specific, like I remember you saying to both of us, how would you feel as I'm starting to edit this thing? It's, I never wanted it to be about me, but I'm seeing so many different parallels. How would you guys both feel about talking with me about it? And and you really gave us the out too. It was sort of like, if you're not comfortable, or we can just talk. And if there's stuff you don't like, we don't have to put it in. And, and Quinn, our son, which I feel like was the revelation of, because it was sort of like, is Quinn comfortable? And he was so honest with you, but clear about it and loving, and the way he was able to sort of articulate some difficult things to you, but just very clearly, and very sort of, it wasn't loaded with resentment. It was sort of like, oh, my dad and I are having this adult conversation. And so I think for us too, since you and I had been through, and we'd already sort of, talked, fairly publicly about getting back together, that it felt like it was, a really important element to bring to this, beautiful story about your parents, about your family, about you,
Yeah. And it's also something I'd never done before, really, to be that open about personal stuff. Even like in every interview I'd probably ever done, there's always a guardedness up there, because I just don't feel like
always
you have to reveal every single thing just because somebody's asking you.
Right.
I mean, the innie outie, I have to say, like, it's not lost on me, right? That for lovers of Severance, or for if you had, like, there's so much, and I grew up, I feel myself struggling to say this because I haven't said it on this podcast. I sort of dance around it. I come from a dysfunctional family, but I've never been specific that alcoholism was a really big part of, all the different voices and all the different accents. The one thing we all had in common, my joke is that we all hail from Alcoholia, whatever country that is. And, like, for that to be shameful instead of like, of course people, have you ever watched Men? I mean, the standard of the time was for people to have a 3-martini lunch or whatever. Mm-hmm. And yet, shame or perfectionism, like being so guarded. And so it's a prison. And watching the film felt like just, it was so liberating to the style of it, the way you the way it unfolds. I guess I want to ask, was there anything, I'm not going to give away what your son shares. I will say I felt healing in my own experience of my parents, because in the film, you lovingly hold up this mirror. It's not judgment. It's not shaming. And I feel how much when you don't judge or shame your parents, you also give yourself permission to stop judging or shaming yourself.
I would also say that, about the alcoholism part of it is, it's not about, anybody who's dealt with it and who's either, had somebody, a relative, a loved one, or themselves dealt with it. You know that, it's not about the shame aspect of it is, of course, about the shame of the secret or the, feeling, that feeling of not being good enough or being, weak or something that you can't, deal with this, this disease. But the other aspect of it that's really, I think, the more debilitating part of it is the lack of acknowledgement of it in a family. It was what you were talking about, which we had in our family too. And it wasn't like something that was like intentional, I think, or insidious or anything like that. It was just the, product of the time and the person, my dad, who wasn't talking about it, my mom wasn't talking about it, because my dad was trying to figure out how to deal with it and how to get through it, and didn't have those tools and those, the acceptance at that time to really be able to talk about that stuff out loud. Though they were doing a lot of self-help therapies, but that was the one thing nobody was talking about. And the great thing in our family, that the gift that we had, was that my mom got sober later in her life and was very, very open about all this and wanted to talk about it and to air it out. And I think that's the key is, it's being able to, just reveal the secrets in a family. It takes the air out of it, and it takes the, that sort of the shame and the pain, all these things, because they come out of this sort of like, not acknowledging the truth.
Yes.
And when you let that go, it's really freeing. And so for me in making the movie, it was definitely something I struggled with, in making it, thinking about.
Did you really? Because I was wondering,
yeah, for sure.
Because watching from the outside, I'm like, wow, because I'm like, how am I going to do this? I struggle with my mom to this day. Like, I don't know how to talk about. Everybody's got a different version of the story. And so I just don't talk about it. And I felt closer.
All I could do was sort of go off of, what my mom had done and said and how I felt she would react to it in my mind. But if I'm being honest, I did wait till both of them were gone to make the movie.
I noticed that.
Because I probably, if I'm being honest, again, my dad, because I think my dad was so protective and loving towards my mom and towards us. And a part of him really couldn't sort of embrace that thing of my mom's of my mom's alcoholism in a way that he always felt like he had to be protective of her. And I think that just came out of love for her. Yeah. And, maybe he could have benefited by, talking to people about it. And I'm sure he did to therapists, because that thing we were talking about not acknowledging it, there was resentment that I had towards my dad for a long time that I didn't even realize what it was that was related to that. Because I didn't even realize that my mom was alcoholic until I was older, really. And somebody took me to a group where they're talking about that and the effect of alcohol on relatives, and it clicked for me. And I was like, oh, wow. That's what I experienced, and we just never talked about it. So I think for my dad, it was always hard for him to really embrace that. And he was the one I probably was more concerned about how they would react to the movie in revealing that stuff about
I was going to say, you did a Q&A fairly recently, and the moderator asked what you think your parents would think of it being out in the world now. And I thought you answered it really beautifully. I thought you said you thought your mom would be really happy with it, and that your dad would love it, but say, you maybe could have left out a few things. And that's kind of sums up the way Jerry was, because it only came from love. It was always, even when Anne was very open about it. And I share a little bit about, the way Anne would talk to me as a mother.
Yes.
I could hear, her almost apologetically having these like, you take care of, don't worry, it's going to be okay. And what you're doing is great. And what you're doing, 'cause she knows she missed those moments. And, it was never lost on me that through our entire relationship, and we were all very close. My mom is very close in our family, and your parents, everyone sort of knew everything that was going on. And I remember your mom, when she knew things were not fully on track with us, she would pull me aside and say, you worry about yourself. It's not about him. And you take it. And it was she so had my back.
Like there's such beautiful footage of her with you, and I'm watching that. They were kind of revolution. Not everybody in the 1960s and 70s was doing all of this introspective therapy, self-help, all of that. So they were really, I mean, I could be wrong, but my family was like, therapy, what? Like there was absolutely not. It was like, you're going to pay somebody to listen to you talk about problems? That's crazy. And then they would get crazier and crazier because they refused to talk about their problems, right? I was thinking about the generational, like you said, your parents kind of gave you this blueprint. And now I'm looking at you and Christine. And as I listened to your kids be so forthright and that same energy of like love and not judgment, even the part where I was like, ooh, the moments where I was like, oh God, I can't say that to my mom or whatever. Right. It just felt like actually that truth is a gift. Like it looks uncomfortable or cringy or whatever before you do it. But like I look at you two and I know nothing's perfect, but my God, like to keep it with this parallel of where the country is, if we would just admit like two things, I just feel like if we could just say, hey, it's terrible the way we've been treating people, or hey, maybe we shouldn't have bombed those folks. Like if we could just be honest, I feel like it's a gift we would give ourselves as a culture. And do you see that parallel, or am I crazy? I just keep coming back to like, this movie it's a metaphor for what we need to do as a country. Like I've made it big.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't it be amazing if that's just, I still look at for us, the fact that, even going back to what you talked about of how we all, when we're younger, say we're never going to be like our parents. And of course it's part of our blood. It's who we are. And there's going to be things, but I feel like if we can break those patterns, and like you said, it's so uncomfortable, those uncomfortable things, like my DNA, I am not wired that way. I think because you were in therapy, because of your parents, it came easier to you, but that still doesn't mean it was easy. It still doesn't mean it still didn't make having difficult conversations easier. And I think aren't the biggest breakthroughs, don't they come from being the most uncomfortable?
Yes.
I remember an elementary school teacher of our son saying, there's going to be things that we're going to work on. This was like second or third grade. And the teacher was saying, there's going to be things that we're going to be doing this year that are going to almost feel like they're going to give you a stomach ache. It's going to get uncomfortable. But I promise you, by the end of the year, you're not going to have a stomach ache around those feelings, around what that is anymore, because you're going to learn it. We're going to move through it together. And I just thought that would be great if our whole country could do it that way.
If you two, you're both therapy people, if you could speak to somebody who says, oh, Ben and Christine, like they're like at the top of their field, they're super visible, they have all these wonderful things in their lives and they know their calling, and I'm over here, I don't know my calling, and when I look around in this world, I'm like, why would I even get out of bed? What would you say to somebody who feels lost right now and far away from anything like the feel, deal, and heal that you two represent so much?
Well, I would say that's, I understand, I get it, because I think we all feel that way. It's at certain times, it's how you react to it and how you kind of move forward through life, because it's really hard. And I think that's like a thing that is very personal in terms of where you're at in your life. I have days where I, am like, I can deal with this. I'm going to go do my things. And there are days when I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to get out of bed. Or, I do feel depressed, or and like, I think the acknowledgement of first of all, the acknowledgement that that's okay. And that these are all things that people deal with, mental health is something that we're all, navigating. And that it's okay to feel all those feelings, the negative ones for sure, because it is a crazy time. I think about the last 10 years and, what's gone on in the country and in politics and, with the pandemic and all these things that have happened that our kids have dealt with in their formative years. It's extremely traumatic and really, really not, what we experienced growing up. And so I would just say, like, it's okay to feel that way. And it is crazy out there. And the world does, need people to have a different way of looking at how we interact with each other. That unfortunately the modeling through social media and, and with our, president is just all, it's just all wrong, and it's not good. And, it's unleashed this vitriol and frustration and anger that people are able to express on social media that is affecting and hurtful, even though it's not quote unquote real. It's still, it affects us as humans.
Yeah.
Whether it's, on an emotional level, an addictive level of how, algorithms and this stuff is designed to affect you.
Right.
So it's a real thing. So you should know that it's okay that we're all kind of trying to navigate this world right now. And at the end of the day, what you're talking about, about having a self-awareness and being willing to look at yourself and accept yourself for, the good and the bad, which is something that I struggle with every day, trying to really figure out the things I can change that are healthy and would be good for me, habits and things like that. But then other things I can't change that I just have to accept too. All of that.
Also, surround yourselves with people that make you feel good, people that you smile when they walk into a room, that light you up, that fill you up. I mean, I think that's really something that, COVID taught us too, is sort of, because it's so easy to isolate. It's so easy to just go on your phone and scroll and look at all the great life everybody else has. But none of that is real. None of it is real. That is curated. That is putting out something that you want, that person wants the world to see. And the real stuff is, what makes you laugh? What, who are the people that bring you joy? And I just think that is...
And that are in your corner, that are
always
that
your
love
back.
you and that you love. And opening up, I think the thing is, like, we all have this sort of, closed circle of our family, the people that we just love unconditionally. It's that thing of really trying to open up to, loving in a bigger way, which is, I think, it's challenging in this world because it's just not designed for it, and everybody has their defense shields up, which they kind of have to survive in a lot of ways. But then, now I think it's just gotten to a point where there's so much the frustration and the aggression and that's out there that has this sort of, outlet through social media is, I think, really, really destructive.
I couldn't agree more. And I guess, it's funny. One of the tricky pieces to this is it's so both and, right? Like I can imagine with your kids, I've met a few, kind of like Gen Z and even Alpha kids who are like, they're like this I'm gonna like use a flip phone, and they're
right. It's almost retro coming back. Like it's totally a not right.
Totally. They're like, it's analog coded. I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means, but I trust you. But then there's like, it's both, right? The feeling of you have to be plugged into that, or you can. I struggle with that, with, reaching my audience or whatever that is. And it's like, but your point, Christine, how do you feel? Like if I'm on there and I'm like, I want to die, that might be an indicator that it's not great for you.
It's not a positive thing, right?
It might not be positive. If it makes you want to die, it might not be the best thing. And like finding that balance, I just think about this art that you both put into the world. I think we're in a time, in which it is the worst. It's Dickensian, right? It's the best of times in so many ways because people are talking more. And you, Ben, talking about your parents in a way that you maybe wouldn't have been able to without the, catastrophe that was the pandemic. I thought about how there's almost a mystical, there's almost something bigger at play that I have to believe in, that like even as terrible as it feels, we'll find where there's beauty. And you two coming together in the middle of a pandemic is very helpful to me to just remind myself, even if it feels terrible, look for the love, stay open to it. And the fact that the film was being made at that same time, I think there's something I'm going to take away, for sure to sort of hold on to, because it can feel really dark and it can be hard to find those examples. But this is a great one.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think making the movie and having the feedback that I've gotten from people on a personal level is just unlike anything I've ever experienced, because it really is so personal. And having never done anything like that, I never experienced that kind of connection that you can have with people on something.
Would you mind sharing? I'm so curious because I thought to myself, and I think I might have heard this in an interview, people must be like, wow, Ben, it's like, it gets deep and it's really beautiful and personal. Have people come to you like, Ben, I went through this because you've opened up?
Yeah, that's been the amazing thing is people telling me, how much this reminded them of either their own issues with their parents or their kids in terms of their, feelings of guilt of being a parent and,
a working parent.
Yeah. And not just the show business aspect of it, which for me was, something that I really was hoping for with the movie is that thematically it would connect with people on the level of just how we can all identify with being in a family and then the creative process too. But I even think like it's not even just like the creativity is not limited to people who, act or make movies or are in the arts. Creativity is how, people express themselves in life in whatever way. And that process, if you are a creative person, you're committed to something inside of you that needs to express that, there's always going to be a struggle that you have with that balance with that and your relationship with your, creativity or art, whatever it is, and your relationships with people. And it was scary putting it out in the beginning because I just didn't know.
Yeah, it really was like birthing this baby. I feel like because it was yours for so long. I mean, we of course got to see pieces of it and earlier cuts of it. And even as you were going through the footage, it was almost like you would have an aha moment and you'd call us in and we'd look at these pieces of footage as you were discovering them. But I remember the feeling when you said, it's like, I've never put, like, these things get reviewed still. And I'm like, you cannot look, this is you cannot look at, and we also all said, if anyone has anything negative to say about this, where is their soul? They're soulless. So
correct.
We can all just collectively agree that, but putting something out there that's so personal and knowing that they're...
But it's kind of amazing because for me, it's been the one project probably that no matter what, it really, of course I'm going to, might take in how it's received and want it to be well received. But at the end of the day, you have no control over that. But this is the one project where I don't really give a shit because I was going to make this movie no matter what. I had to make this movie. And I tried to make the best version of it, but it's also such a subjective thing that this is the best version for me of this movie.
How much do we love this I don't really give a shit energy about the things we put into the world? Or really, the more important part, making whatever is the best version of that thing for us. I'm going to meditate on that for a little while we take a quick break. And when we come back, you'll hear the unlikely connection I have to Ben Stiller's parents. And we're back, talking to Ben and Christine about their beautiful documentary, Stiller and Meara, Nothing is Lost. I have this, really fond memory of your parents. I'm going to say what I remember. I was like, Jerry Stiller and Ann Meara are coming. And I freaked out. And we had a poster, which I can't find, that had their names on it. Anyway, I just remember that It was Valentine's Day, and we were talking about their artistry and there being these, comedic talents and collaborators, and as a couple, like how had they done this all these years and simultaneously, without missing a beat. Jerry said, lots of therapy. And Anne said, lots of red wine. And it was like, you couldn't have scripted it better.
That sounds like my childhood. Yeah. If you didn't necessarily know my parents or, wanted to really learn about their career, that you could just start watching this movie, that it could, you could connect with it on an emotional level with these themes we're talking about. So I was really happy that it happened. And I felt that from people, irregardless of the reviews or, how it was accepted in the media. It was just, I was getting that on a just personal level from people anecdotally every time I show the movie. Yeah.
It is so freeing to watch somebody who we know so well, who's, literally a meme and all the things.
Yeah.
Be this like beautifully, I know we use vulnerable all the time, but it's like, it just strips down all the artifice, all the stuff that we're taught to see and think about people. And instead it's a story of a family. It's a story of, it's grief. And it's, it's like showing up for all of it in this beautiful way that made me think, you know what? I do that at my best. I go through the box of photos, or I show up as best I can, and I'm honest with my relationships as best I can be. And nobody's perfect in the film. Everybody's beautiful. It's a beautiful, imperfect portrait.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I keep coming back to America because there's a part of me that's like, unless I'm moving to New Zealand, which I have done an episode about that, I need these touchstones of stories like yours, the ways you both are as storytellers, as kind of a distilled version of what America hopefully could still be if we all do this together.
Talking about it, I feel like people are connected to that stuff, regardless of the politics and all that, which I find, being somebody who's recognizable and, politically, kind of
sane.
outspoken.
Politically, you're sane. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sane, but but the people who we think are not sane politically are not necessarily insane people at all. And that's the thing that I'm kind of reminded of constantly when I meet people, and I go somewhere, I'm like, I don't know, these people might not be, they might be into Trump. They might be, it's like, but I don't feel negative feelings towards them because we're not talking about that stuff. So the frustration I have, with the policies of, with what's happening now is that vulnerable communities are put at risk, and the real life effects of that. But the people in the country, when you're dealing with people and you meet people on a day-to-day basis, it's like people, I think, want to connect in this way you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And, that's the frustration that we all have, is that I think with social media and the way that people interact on it, it's this almost like this kind of like atmosphere and this sort of like, it's volatile and it's raw, but it's people expressing stuff. But then, when you see these people in real life, it's a different situation.
Yeah,
totally.
Now, the scary thing is when it turns into real life action, and that's why it's bad. But, and then that happens. But for the most part, when you're interacting with people, they're human and open and want to connect, I think.
It's so true. But I do think if you have examples on your television of somebody, stoking division and
100%.
Violence and whatever, it makes it a lot harder to.
Yes. And this is what my concern growing up the last 10 years, my kids growing up the last 10 years with, that's what they're, that's what they think politics is. And by the way, politics wasn't great before.
I was going to say.
And the disruptive nature of, what he's done has exposed a lot in I think actually in a good way, what's kind of fucked up about our system. But at the end of the day, politics itself is, a very imperfect vehicle for getting things done that need to get done. But there's so much human nature baked into it in terms of greed and dishonesty and all the things that human beings have been doing for ever since they've been human beings, that it's, something that just unfortunately it is not working the right way. And so, sometimes a disruptor like this coming in, unfortunately, it's now like we're trying to figure out how to react to that, but it's exposing a lot of the reality of what's kind of fucked up in our system.
It goes back to that idea of like, if you go get a scan, like he's a scan that's showing us this cancer or whatever it is that we've got that's real bad. You don't blame the scan. It's there. And so
but you
in a
need
way,
doctors who are honest and go, yeah, you got
you mean the ones who don't think Tylenol's giving us autism?
Right. So, they tell you what's real, right? They tell you what the reality is. Reality. Right. That's the thing.
Well, speaking of reality, I started saying, speaking of reality bites, the thing is, I've contained myself very well to not fangirl out over both of you, but I think that's part of the beauty is that you're both. And I love, that your body of work contributes so much joy to everybody. And I think for people to watch this film, it will contribute so much heart, so much soul to your life if you take the time to watch and be with this beautiful film. So there's so much more. I'm excited for all the statues and all the things.
That's all bullshit. Come on. We know that's
okay, that's fair.
Honestly,
it is all
right.
It's shiny bullshit though. You can't do it.
No, we're all attracted to it. And it's all, but it's also incredibly distracting too, I think, and that's
Say more about that, because I think people would see you as a couple, you're on the red carpet. For a lot of Americans, that is the pinnacle. And that means all your problems are solved and you're a good person.
Not to bash the red carpets because it's fun. It's certainly
because you look great. You look great.
Dress up and to, but it's certainly not reality. That's not, I don't, it's such its own bubble of, and I said to, Ben, the night that we saw you, the night before at the Emmy party, the night of the Emmys for Severance for Ben, I was like, it sounds so cliche, but like everyone in that room has been recognized because there's so much out there. There are so many shows and so many films and so many things. And so when you get chosen to get nominated for one of those awards, like it really does feel like you get to sit in the victory of that for a couple of weeks. But then on the night, more people are going home without the shiny trophies than with them. So, but it doesn't, it's such a strange thing to navigate because mostly that room is filled with the quote, people who are going to lose. And so it's really this, it's so tricky. And it, like you said, everyone's attracted to it. And of course you want to win and you want to feel recognized, but I just feel like none of that matters.
The bottom line is, do you feel worthy without the award? Do you feel
that's
good enough about yourself without it? And, I find a lot of the time I'm doing fine until I then think about, oh, wait a minute, but what do they think? And it's so that's the distraction is like someone reminding you, saying like, because when you're making something, you're in the process, you're doing something to try to like live up to your own standard. And, that's what it's really all about, is about challenging yourself. But, we all want recognition and would love it, but then when it feels
good. It feels good to get to when people say they love you.
Of course,
and
it's like dopamine or whatever.
Right.
But and that's just human nature again. It's like another part of human nature, because at the end of the day, it's just about your own happiness and like how you can, and that's been for me over the years, just sort of trial and error, getting to a place where I'm like, oh, you know what? I think I'll be happier if I, don't pay attention to this. Or, you know what? I do acknowledge that I really would like to win this, but at the end of the day, I have no control over it. And I hope I'm going to be okay if I don't, because, it's whether or not you want your happiness to be dependent on a stranger or not.
I mean, I hear you saying control what you can, like control the controllable.
And that's a constant, by the way, process of reminding myself every day, And but it's good because when you figure out, oh, this actually brings me happiness, that doesn't, then you can just make the sane choice of going, I want to, do the thing that brings me happiness.
Right.
Yes. Yes. And with you two, you remind each other, and it's really obvious.
Well,
which
that
I
for
love.
sure. Living with Christine, it's a full-on reminder. No, she's like, because she'll say, like, what are you doing? Why are you being like that? Just like,
I say it gently.
Listen, she got me out of my head several times, so
Yeah.
you don't need to prove it to
Well,
me.
she's very practical. She's a very practical person.
I am going to continue to lobby for both of you to run for office as a couple. I don't know how we work that.
Just what
but
the
let's-
world needs.
Let's figure it out. I know you
What
have
America
nothing else
needs.
going on, so you have plenty of time. But this, I feel restored. Thank you. I
Yeah.
needed every word, and I'm probably going to watch the movie again because it's good for me to plug into my
You're
soul.
such a delight. I'm so happy to see you.
We'll do it again sometime. I love you both. Deeply grateful for you both. Thank you so, so much.
Okay, first of all, everybody else is jealous because Sarah only brought me. But it's a special occasion. I won't go into the details, but I was very impressed that your mother converted. Anyway,